another episode of the Men's Sexual Mastery Podcast. This is Ben Timby here, joined by your fellow co-host, Ian Hawks.
Welcome. What's up, everybody? Thanks for being here.
Yeah, we're stoked to be here today. We're going to have a drop-in podcast today on the topic of the nature of sexual energy and some of these deeper levels of understanding that we can bring to ensure the best outcome as we're practicing deepening in semen retention, semen intention, Taoist sexual alchemy, as it's called, these tools of transmuting sexual energy into new areas of our life and into deeper lovemaking and deeper orgasms, as we talk about, but the whole gamut.
And also not only transmuting, but also cultivating and generating more and more. But knowing that more isn't always better, and understanding the nature, as you spoke to, of the sexual energy and how we can cultivate that in a way that's truly beneficial for us and not destructive.
Yeah, well said. Yeah, more isn't always better is exactly what we're diving into today. We're going to be talking about how in traditional Chinese medicine, it's understood that sexual energy binds and amplifies whatever is present. So I like to think of this like an accelerant. It's like gasoline that you can pour onto a fire. And you better make sure that your fire is contained or else shit can blow up. Shit can get a little squirrely. And I often say it can be like turning up the volume knob as well. So what does this really mean? When I first heard this expression, sexual energy binds and amplifies, I thought, I took me a while to wrap my mind around it. But the more I've gotten into this work and the deeper we've gone, Hawks, and the trainings with all the men, I see it more and more and more. So I'd love to pass it off to you a little bit to explain how you see this show up or how you understand this concept of sexual energy binding and amplifying.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so something that comes up is this energy, sexual energy, being somewhat neutral. It has the capacity to greatly enhance and amplify our lives in all of the generative positive ways, and it also has the potential to burn the house down, as we see in so many relationships, so many men and people in general that are with this sexual energy in a way that's not really supportive or generative for them or aligned. And learning how to cultivate and harness that sexual energy in a way that's truly beneficial for our lives and for the people in our lives. And so, to answer your question about how this shows up, one of the ways that we see this showing up all the time in the men in our community is an illumination that comes when we start to build and cultivate more sexual energy within ourselves. That binding and amplifying nature of it will start to illuminate the areas in our life where we're not fully in alignment yet. If someone doesn't have a robust community and social life, if they're inherently lonely and they start to build and cultivate more sexual energy, that's likely to show them that, oh, I need to get some more community in my life. I'm actually lonely. Or if where the environment that someone is living in is really out of alignment and not for them, that will be revealed. If there's patterns in life that aren't serving, that will be revealed. Another common experience for men in our program is the realization, like, I got to get my physical health in order. It's really important for me that I start going to the gym, that I go for long walks in nature or runs or get outdoors or start lifting heavy stuff and nurturing my body or putting really healthy, good foods into my body, because that sexual energy, as it builds, if it doesn't have outlets, if there aren't patterns that we've already instilled within ourselves to circulate that energy and to work with it in a good way, it's going to start to cause discomfort. It's going to start to cause, just illumination of the areas where we're not yet fully in alignment. And so that's a couple little pieces, and I know there's lots more. So pass the ball to you. What comes up for you with that question?
Yeah, I think about how so often, ejaculation, porn, sex can be an escape for a lot of men.
Hmm.
And if you think about the nature of how, like, as you start to hold the energy, it becomes uncomfortable. Like that feeling of discomfort is actually your reality,
Mm.
you know?
Yeah.
And like you could continue to ejaculate and release your own sensitivity to the truth of your reality, or you can allow it to build up and actually take an assessment. And this is why in module one of our training that we guide guys in, we focus on energetic leaks, we call it, just all the areas of your life that are out of alignment where you're leaking sexual energy, because ultimately your cup, your vessel, if you will, of your life force cannot be filled. Like we can bring all the practices in the world, but if you have holes in the bottom of your cup, you can't fill water into it. You're not going to be able to fill sexual energy into your life. You're going to continue to feel depleted until you address what's out of alignment. And so that's why this is foundational. And that's why we created that as part of our process. Before getting into any sort of sexual amplification or building up of sexual energy, even semen retention, I really encourage guys to get your house in order, get your shit together, get your containment in place so you can cook a meal rather than burn the house down with this fuel.
Hmm.
I say it's rocket fuel for our transformation. But if we're not clear and we're not intentional and conscious and aligned and in integrity with our deepest knowing, it can actually be really destabilizing. And that also is fine. Ultimately, it's for the best. Like some guys, another one I see a lot and you've seen a lot, I know, is relationships being out of alignment. Guys staying in relationships just because it's comfortable, or maybe the sex is good, but deep down, this isn't your forever partner. It's unfair to you and to your partner, actually, to be staying in something that's out of alignment. That's a big
Hmm.
one. And the more that guys deepen in this practice and in these tools, everything is going to become illuminated. Like you mentioned too, Hawks. Like the noise is gonna get turned up the longer you're
Hmm.
holding on to your semen.
Hmm. Yeah, and on that note of relationships, not only our most intimate relationships, a partner that we may be with, but also relationships such as friends or people that we hang out with and spend our time with. We see a lot of that as well, and hear men speaking to the realization that, oh, actually, certain connections in my life are actually not in alignment anymore.
Hmm.
And the calling back in of that energy, the realization of, oh, these connections, these relationships are actually energetic leaks for me. They're not serving me. They're not generative. They're no longer in alignment. And actually, it has become comfortable to remain in them. And there's a death and a rebirth that's asking to happen here because we need to create space in order to allow ourselves to be open to receiving the new connections, the new opportunities in life that are more aligned for us. And then there's patterns that come along with some of those old connections and relationships as well. If someone has been hanging out with the same group of bros for years and years, and the pattern is to go out to the bar and have drinks and engage in superficial level conversation or watch sports, which is great, some of the time and for some people. And also as men start to desire more depth in their life and might discover that actually alcohol or these certain patterns or substances are no longer in alignment for me, and the relationships that I'm in right now are largely based around the consumption of these substances or the practice of these patterns. There's a letting go here that's required in order for me to open up to receive some new connection, some new community, some new patterns and habits that are actually truly for me now.
Hmm.
And then one last thing that came up for me is a particular man in our program who I'm not going to name, it's all confidential, but even, well, actually not just one man, but the letting go of jobs, like an old
Hmm.
way of being in service or working, that actually realizing, oh, my soul is asking for a new form of service in the world. I'm being called up and into a way of providing value in the world that's different from how I used to. And so this is part of the transformation process in whatever means for transformation there is. The transformation often requires many deaths and rebirths and
Hmm.
shedding of old relationships or work or jobs or habits or patterns or substances or ways of being with ourself, and to have that illuminated so prominently by the generation and cultivation of more sexual energy, it starts to become really clear, okay, I'm going to be required to make a substantial shift in my life. And that could be uncomfortable, but I know that I trust that it will lead to more alignment and more comfortability and what, or more fulfillment, I'll say, rather than comfortability, but true deep fulfillment.
Yeah. Yeah. Well said. Yeah, and we've been talking all about the, sort of negative things or the things that are out of alignment so far, and the shedding processes that, will be accelerated by practicing holding your sexual energy and building it. I'd like to talk a little bit about the amplification, the binding and amplifying of the positive things, because this is really what
Mm-hmm.
most guys show up in the work for. Can you
Mm-hmm.
speak a little bit about that, Hawks?
Whew. The one of the most common things that I hear from men and that we hear is just the feeling of being alive. Like, oh, I'm so alive. I'm feeling powerful. I'm feeling energized. I'm feeling like there's more of me to give and to be with for myself and for everyone around me. And those the at the depth of our being, I think, is inherently powerful, connected, embodied ways of being. And the amplification of those ways of being allows us to bring more of ourselves online and creates a feeling of well-being that's that's unparalleled. I mean, it's part of the journey of being a human here, as I've come to understand it, is how can I tap into the truth of me and bring more of that online? And so, as we bring aspects of our life into alignment and engage in practices and ways of being and relationships and service that are really for us, that are aligned, the amplification of those allows us to step further and further in and give and receive more and more of what we came here to give and receive and be.
Mm. Yeah, well said. I definitely would resonate and echo all of that. And, with the vitality, with focus, creativity, some guys even say like your intuition. It's almost
Mm-hmm.
like you're microdosing, I would say, is the best comparison, I would draw. Like for anyone who's microdosed psilocybin or something, it's just like almost like a slight dose of that. Um, and yeah, what you said, just this overall sense of well-being, this kind of abundant amount of energy. And when it's brought into the lovemaking, of course, like this is the final realm, and this is the cherry on top. This is the, what everyone wants above all. But we often say that your lovemaking is just going to be a byproduct. The relationships that come into your life, and especially with a romantic partner, is going to be the byproduct of your attunement, your alignment, and the amplification of the truest, most heart centered, authentic version of you. Like we often say, the quantum field is going to be rearranging around who you are being. And it can take some time at first, and that's why in our training we do 6 whole months. Like a lot of my teachers say, it can take 90 days of consistent state change for your reality to completely reshape around that new state of being. And so when we bring in sexual energy, we're actually accelerating that. We're accelerating the timelines in my experience, and
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I think when it comes into lovemaking, we talk about the attunement to your partner, the ability to almost read their body and intuit where they want to be touched, to feel their pleasure in you, and to allow, and this is where we're getting deeper into the work of separating orgasm and ejaculation and these other things, which that's a whole nother topic, but with this increased sexual energy, these subtle neural pathways of pleasure start to open up, which I think are also connected to that overall sense of well being we talk about that's just permeating all of life all the time. But especially in the bedroom, it's really turned up. And with that increase, with that binding and amplifying of love, it increases even more so. And this is getting to another level within, the Taoist lineage, which is this is like thousands of years old of sexual technology, we like to say, that was held by the elite of China. This is what built dynasties, and these teachings and techniques were secret, were very guarded for millennia, really until the 80s when Mantak Chia brought it forward, my teacher. But in their lineage, they say sex amplifies love, sexual energy will amplify love, and love will amplify sex. And this is a whole nother level of amplification. So this is like essentially when you're with a partner who is your life partner and you are heart aligned with that person, there's a whole nother level of access where now it's almost like this echo chamber of amplification. And that's when you can really reach next level states when we come into contact with another who's aligned in their heart. And I know this may sound a little far out, but and you really got to experience it to know it, but you know, I think we all know deep down that true love, like who doesn't want true love? And what's standing in the way of that? And ultimately, when we can go through this process of learning how to hold and build our sexual energy and let it be this personal transformation journey that we're talking to get us in alignment with who we really are and to allow us to be self-sourced and no longer extracting our pleasure or extracting our love or our sexual fulfillment from anything outside of us, when we can sit with all the parts that are uncomfortable and allow them to be transmuted over time. And with the support, we have this in our container with one-on-one guys and guys in group training, but it is also accelerated when you have a support network and you're not doing it alone. But all this to say, when you go through this process, then you can start to show up in a way that is actually attracting the kind of partner that is your dream partner. And what
Mm-hmm.
happened for you, it happened for me, it's happened
Mm-hmm.
for many other guys who come through our training. That ultimately is the end goal. I think for almost all of us, like almost everyone wants to be with a partner. And that's when we get into the sheets. That's when we get into the sexual, quote unquote, sexual mastery, which actually is life force mastery, which is across the entire spectrum. And this could be a whole nother podcast, us talking about the deeper levels of binding and amplifying and building sexual energy. And I know our time is a little bit limited today, but I think it's really important to note the additional layer that love amplifies sex and sex amplifies love. And
Mm-hmm.
again, this isn't stuff we made up. This is from the Taoist lineage. So, is there anything, Hawks, that you would like to speak to on that? Love to pass it over.
Yeah, something that comes up for me as you're speaking to that, bring it specifically into the bedroom and with a partner and the amplification of love through sex and sex through love. I think also of the the role that presence plays in all of this. And speaking specifically to the act of making love with a partner and coming back to this nature of the binding and amplifying of what's already there. And so I'm thinking about a situation where two partners come together and there isn't a level of grounded presence in the man for this example. And so if he's coming into that sexual experience disconnected from himself, from his own body, and inherently then also from his partner, the act of physical sex can still happen, but that disconnection that's there, that lack of presence, will be amplified as he checks out. And if he's in fantasy or thinking of someone else or something else in his life while going through the physical practice of mutual masturbation, essentially, in this example, I feel like if there isn't presence there, if there isn't connection to the body and to the partner, then you're essentially using your partner to masturbate. It's not actually true lovemaking. And so the sexual energy in that situation is amplifying that disconnection. And it will serve to actually amplify the disconnection between two partners. If this habit of disembodied, dissociated sex happens repeatedly, if the man isn't there and he's not present with his partner, she's also not going to be fully present there. She's likely to go into some experience of dissociation, and her body will start to close up over time and contract and hold tension in the yoni. That is an indication that, hey, there hasn't been true connection here. And over time, if that pattern repeats, it will serve to further and further disconnect the two partners. And now, if we flip that to the inverse, and the man in this example is showing up in his body, in the moment, in his presence, and then therefore also able to be present with his partner. That in itself, the practice of presence greatly amplifies our energy as a whole. We have more energy to give. Wherever our attention goes, our energy flows. And so if our attention is elsewhere because we're not present, our energy is also going elsewhere. But if we're fully present with our partner and ourselves and the act of lovemaking, then all of our energy is there as well. And then that sexual energy is going to greatly amplify that. It's going to amplify the presence. And if there's eye contact and that feeling of really like being attuned and understanding what your partner is experiencing, because there's such a level of presence that you're reading and picking up on all of the subtle cues, and the breath is synced up and the eyes are engaged and gazing into each other. That presence is so greatly amplified, and it's serving to deeply nourish that connection between those two people and amplifying then their love. And so I would say, like, sex amplifies love if and when there's presence there.
Mm.
And if there isn't presence there, then the energy isn't there, and then it's actually serving to amplify the disconnection.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that you highlighted that. And I love the whole idea of sexual energy just amplifying presence in
Hmm.
general, like outside of
Hmm.
the sexual act. And this is something that you also will find, like your meditations are going to be a lot
Mm.
deeper. Your qigong, I notice it when I'm gone quite a while, building up my energy. I can feel it's like static moving between my. Actually, I feel it right now, just like this little tingling between my fingers. There's, I had a conversation the other day or some comments on TikTok with someone who was asking like, I'm so connected to my meditation practice and I'm so in bliss. Like, why would I need to change it? Or like, why would I try to integrate sexual energy into that? And it's hard to tell guys. It's like, if this is basic synergy, like, well, why don't you just try it? See what happens. See what happens when you practice holding on to your semen for a while, or practicing self pleasure or sexual pleasure with a partner with deep presence and not ejaculating. That's going to amplify your energy quicker. And then notice changes in your meditation. Notice changes in your qigong, and all the other areas we've talked about. Your workouts. That's another giant one people know. And I've spoken to it before. Like, it's very known in the MMA space and boxing space, like not to have an ejaculation the week or so before your big fight. This has been held for a long time. Like, a lot of this stuff is so hidden in plain sight. But yeah, coming full circle into the awareness that sexual energy is going to bind and amplify everything. So whether you are in coherence with yourself, if you're using it in a very contained, intentional way, it's going to be rocket fuel. And if you're in dissonance with yourself, if you're not in self love or self acceptance, if you're out of integrity with yourself or your inner guidance, it's going to shed, or your relationships or your job, all the things we've talked about, it's going to shed that, or it's going to make it so uncomfortable until you shed it. It's going to bring up
Mm.
the dis-ease. And ultimately, this is kind of what's at the core of our entire being is, are we vital and are we healthy? Are we in ease or are we in dis-ease? Are we deficient? And our thoughts, our emotions, our, yeah, all these different areas of our life are just going to be generated from our state of being ultimately. So that's why we say it's so hard to encapsulate these understandings of like what sexual life force energy really is and what it is we're doing in this work. But this is it, and this is why I call this like holistic men's sex ed, because this is a holistic program. The flower doesn't bloom in nature until the roots are solid, the stem is solid, the leaves are green, there's no disease, there's no pests. Sexual reproduction in nature is the final stage of development. It is the byproduct of a healthy, thriving organism. And you can be having sex. You can be having what you think is a lot of great sex and what I call like porn reenactment, which is most of our sex education, and that's fine. Lots of ejaculations, lots of penetration and primal energy. I love that myself too, but it's almost like a flower that's only partially bloomed. Like you may only be 1% opened in your sexuality, and you may be missing out on 99% of the pleasure that actually you're capable of, and not just for you, but for your partner, and not just for the bedroom, but for your entire life. Your vitality. This is your vitality. So we're here to spread the word and educate our brothers in this. Just yell it from the rooftops, as we've said before. Just to really educate and inspire brothers to try this out. Try this out firsthand and just see what happens. And one final note here I'll just say is if you are just trying this out for the first time, part of the reason we share this is just as a disclaimer. And we share this with all the guys in our training. Too much, too fast is one definition of trauma. And it takes time, just like gardening, tilling the garden. You got to work on the weeding and planting new seeds. These are new neural pathways, new behavioral patterns, and all the rest. And with consistent repetition and with, we're going to stumble as we learn to walk, as we say all the time. This is why we have daily accountability for guys. And I encourage anyone listening, if you have someone you can get in daily accountability with, share your commitments, share what's going on every day, send these messages every single day. This is how it changes. We're not a light switch. It's not fixing
Mhm.
something suddenly. It's this binding and amplifying and raising of the energy needs to be done mindfully and slowly. And this is why we also created the training program to give guys the tools and the framework and the support to deepen in this work. So yeah,
Mhm.
that's everything I wanted to say on that. Is there any last thoughts you have, Hawks, before we sign off?
Sure, just that as you were speaking to, the journey can be a little uncomfortable as we start out. And that discomfort is indication that change is happening. And that's where sticking with it, being committed, having that consistency to continue to follow through, because on the other side of that discomfort is a whole new you. It's a whole new chapter. It's a shedding that can be uncomfortable. Change is typically uncomfortable. But when we're aligned and when we're supported, that change is orienting us towards something that's even better. And so stick with it and know that it's perfectly normal to be a little uncomfortable at the beginning. But that's what we're here for. That's what this is about. It's not all meant to be comfortable all of the time. But as we come more and more into alignment, build our energy up more and more in our life force, things do become just naturally more blissful, which is
Mm.
which is where we're ultimately headed. Mm.
Mm. Yeah, that's it, man. Yeah, we always say in our training, it's like we're learning how to make love and not war with the resistance, because what we
Mm.
resist persists. When we can learn how to slow down, breathe, penetrate with our consciousness, with our smile, with our breath, smiling at our demons, and not running from them.
Mm.
This is the way. The only way in is through. And just
Mm.
like Hawk said, I want to double click on that and highlight that. Like there is so much waiting for you on the other side with just a little delayed gratification. It's uncomfortable for a little season, but once you've tasted this, it's like a kid who's addicted to eating Skittles and then, you know, introducing them to creme brulee or like these extravagant, desserts. And It's it almost like letting go of the
Or
known to open to the unknown. Yeah.
yeah, or fruit.
Yeah,
Right?
or fruit.
Something that's actually like
Yeah.
once we allow ourselves to sensitize again to what's actually natural, we can fully appreciate and savor what's there, what God has given us just inherently here to nourish us and to bring great pleasure and bliss. And I know for myself, having gone through that process of eating refined sugars for much of my early life and then removing that stimulus from my experience, now I bite into a fresh piece of fruit and I'm like, this is better than any piece of candy I've ever had.
Yeah.
And it's also nourishing me in ways that that candy never did. And there's no going back. It's just, it's it's not even a question anymore at this point on my journey. And there's a process to that. There's often the process of coming up and out of engaging with that stimulus. And then we might dip back into an old pattern and be like, oh, this tastes really good in the moment. But then 5 minutes, 5 hours later, we feel awful. And then it's that reminder of like, oh, yeah, this actually wasn't ever in alignment. Let me remove this again and get back to the really nourishing generative practices or ways of being or foods that actually feel good in the moment and serve me in the long term.
Yeah. Yeah. Well said, man. All right. Well, we'll close out with that. Thank you so much, Hawks, for joining me today. And thank you, listener, for tuning in. We'll see you on the next one. Sending lots of love your way.